Welcome back to Senate Education Wednesday, March 16th. Ms. St. James, great having you with us on H716. We have already received, we've all been receiving emails about this bill, so I thought we might start early, jump in and just understand it, what's happening, and what folks are trying to do in it, and what changes are possibly going to be made. So with that, if you don't mind, we have a copy in front of us and the floor is yours.
Sure. Good afternoon, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. Can you all hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Okay. So H716 is a House bill that has not been voted out of the House yet, as you all know. So what you have before you today are two different documents. One is let's see, I'm looking just to make sure that I have the right one up in front of me. One is the committee bill from House Education as it passed out of House Education. And the other document is an amendment by House Ways and Means.
We have that amendment. Yeah. Perfect, thank you. So it's a brief bill.
It's a very brief bill. There's only 3 sections, including the effective date. And the amendment from House Ways and Means only applies to section 1. Okay. So this is the House Miscellaneous Ed Bill. You'll notice that both substantive sections of the bill address special education, but it is titled a miscellaneous bill. So section 1 is amending section 2961 in Title 16, which is the census grant section under the special education funding chapter, or the special education chapter in Title 16. If you'll all remember, in Act 173, part of Act 173 moved the current model of special education funding from mainstream block grants to this census grant. And the way that the Act 173 got everyone to the census grant is a transition period. And so section 2961 not only addresses the transition period, it addresses the goal of where everyone will be after that transition period. So section 1 of H716 is addressing the first year of the transition period, which is fiscal year 2023. So that's coming up. So and just briefly an overview to kind of frame how this fits in. Everyone's moving to, in 2027, everyone will be using the uniform base amount for their census grant. In order to get there, so it's not a shock to everyone's system, what 2961 does is, starting in 2023, there is a, let's see, what is it called here? The census grant amount for fiscal year 2023 is the average amount that a supervisory union received for fiscal years 2018, 2019, and 2020 from the state for special education under sections 2961, 2963, multiplied or increased by an inflator. So, and then that number for 2023 is used as prorated, and it's used to get everyone to the base grant for 2027 that everyone will be using. So what this proposes to do is, for fiscal year 2023, instead of taking the average amount of supervisory union received in years 2018, 2019, and 2020, it proposes to change those years used to calculate the average amount to 2019, 2020, and 2021. Nothing else changes. The inflator is still used. The transition model is still used. The uniform base amount remains, the calculation for that remains the same. The only thing changing that section 1 proposes to change is the years used to calculate the average amount a supervisory union received to calculate the money they will receive for special education funding in 2023. That's what passed out of the House Education. Do you want to look at the amendment from House Ways and Means addresses this section? Do you want to look at that together with section 1? Or do you want me to go through the whole bill?
Let's do the amendment while we're on that topic, please.
So the amendment is, it's simple to talk through. The concept itself is a bit more challenging, but what it does is the Committee on Ways and Means is proposing a instance of amendment in striking out that little I section. So striking out the entire what House Ed has proposed in little I and replacing it with the language that you'll see here in the amendment. But the only, how it reads is the average amount. So again, we're just looking at how to calculate fiscal year 2023, that base amount. So the amendment reads as the average amount it received for fiscal years 2018, 2019, and 2020, or the average amount it received for fiscal years 2019, 2020, and 2021, whichever amount is greater. And then it remains the same from the state for special education under sections 2961, 2963, and 2963A. What this does is it says, if you are a supervisory union and you are if you are calculating how much money you are going to receive in 2023 for special education funding, and if you calculate that using years 2018, 2019, and 2020, and you come out better, meaning you would receive more money using those years to calculate than if you used 2019, 2020, and 21, you use the 2018, 2019, and 2020 calculation, which is current law. However, if it would help you to use the House proposed amendment of changing the years to 2019, 2020, and 2021, you can use it. So it's essentially a hold harmless. If you were going to, if current law does better for you, use it. And if the House proposal does better for you, use it. And then that's the change to section 1 there.
So this will be a joint effort with us and finance, without a doubt. Any questions on section 1 right now? And I suspect this, if this left, having been in the House Ways and Means, and this is likely going to be what the final bill looks like. Their amendment. It's
House Ways and Means amendment to the House Ed committee bill. Yeah.
But given that committee's work on things, I think that's likely what will become what the House passes. But that's not for you to really weigh in on, I guess. Okay. So, great. Senator Persley.
Was there a fiscal note on this issue? Did you know?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get that. Yeah. Anything else before we move to what might be the more controversial section? Okay, Ms. St. James, section 2, please.
Section 2 of the House Education Committee bill, as it passed out of House Education, is State Board of Education 2360 Rule Series partial delay. It is the intent of the General Assembly to allow educators and staff time to adequately prepare for the delivery of special education services as required under the State Board of Education Special Education Rule Series 2360, which takes effect on July 1, 2022. Therefore, notwithstanding any provision to the contrary under 16 BSA 164, the State Board of Education shall suspend the implementation of Rules 2362 and 2362.2.5 until July 1, 2023. The remaining rules under the 2360 Rule Series shall take effect on July 1, 2022. And then the entire bill has a effective date of July 1, 2022.
Yeah, Senator Chinnan.
Might we be going over what these rules are? Because I'm receiving a lot of emails about this.
Sure. I think I can certainly, so the terms that are being used are adverse effect and, oh boy. The other term that's being used is escaping me. I'm pulling them up right now. I do suggest that you have someone from either the agency or the State Board of Education come in and speak directly to these rules since they are their rules. But this, let me pull them up right now.
Where would I, sorry, you got a question?
Yeah, please.
Where would I find these rules myself, Elizabeth?
I can send a link to the committee right now, but
Great.
they're on the State Board of Education's website.
Is it trauma informed?
So they're not in the green books in anywhere.
No, these are administrative rules. These are not statutes. So these are rules that the General Assembly has delegated authority or rulemaking authority to the State Board of Education in the education area of lawmaking. And this is a rule that the State Board of Education has adopted. It's gone through ICAR and LCAR, and it has an effective date of July 1, 2022.
So in lay terms, what exactly is being postponed? What do they really want to postpone here?
Yeah, so I'm pulling up the specific rules.
Okay.
I'm going to email them to Daphne right now.
Okay.
I have another layperson question.
Yeah.
So there are rules, not statutes, not things we passed. You said they went through LCAR and what is that?
What a new guy.
So
Watch it first,
you as the General Assembly can delegate rulemaking authority to the executive branch and the various state agencies there. In order to implement those rules have to go through certain processes. And the first step is the Interagency Commission on Rulemaking, which is ICAR. And
What happened, just for clarification, so this is where the Agency of Education with interagency would work on rules.
Yeah, so the interagency, oh boy, this is a little out of my wheelhouse, but I know a little bit enough about it. So ICAR, just is the interagency.
My next question is going to be is if they're rules and we didn't set them, but our statute says you can't, you have to delay those rules. Is there any shady things in the background where they just change the rule and like they just would change what the rule is and put it in a different rule? You can't do that. There's some controls there.
Well, they could, but they would have to go through the rulemaking process, which is very long. It's months and months and months long.
Okay.
There's a period of public comment. And the last step in the rulemaking process is LCAR, which is the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules. So there is a joint legislative committee that reviews all of these rules before they take effect in each of the different administrative agencies in the executive branch. So
I always tell people sometimes committees and the legislature just doesn't have the time because we're only here for 5 months to make rules. So it's usually better for oftentimes the agency to do it. Senator Hooker.
So apparently there's some sense that the department needs extra time. And I guess I'm just wondering, what are those things that are causing them to need this extra time? How does it relate to what they've had to do? They've been providing special education for a long time.
Senator
Birchwood.
The agency is not asking for more time. The rules have already been approved. But when
Implementation of
the implementation was like, okay, we're doing this is a change, so we're giving you a heads up. I think the rules were approved last fall, like I want to say October. And so they said, we'll give you till July, you teachers, the schools that have to implement these rules. We'll start in July.
Okay, so again, my question is, how different is what they're going to have to do to what they've been doing? And that's, where's, what's causing this need for the delay?
Right, and we can have AOE and
Yeah.
others in to talk about it. So again, Ms. St. James, in the simplest form, what is this delay actually doing? So it's all of those rules would be delayed to give people with the document you just sent us, basically they're asking for more time.
So this section is intended to delay implementation of 2 specific rules within the entire rules series. The rule series itself is 169 pages.
Yeah.
As posted on the website. And so this,
232 and 236.25.
Correct. It is,
Okay.
the title of 2362 is eligibility for children ages 6 years through 21.
Mhm.
And so it's the rule that addresses eligibility for special education services. And 2362 is 2362.2.5 is additional procedures for identifying children with specific learning disabilities. Again, it's about identifying individuals who need services. And so the intent of this section is only to delay the implementation of those 2 specific rules.
I'm sorry, I just got distracted there for a minute. Senator Tarantini, is it warm enough there? Oh, you've got the baby.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm sorry, I thought you just had a blanket.
I'm holding the sleeping baby here.
Oh, how sweet. That's great. That's great. I thought I was gonna text Jessica and ask her to turn the heat up. I didn't see the baby, I just saw the blanket.
I can't afford the heat bill. Can't afford it.
That's why it's moving.
So we'll have folks in to try to understand, why they want the delay. But Ms. St. James, can you give us a sense of what you heard, just a little bit of a preview of why people were interested in this, why they felt they needed the delay?
That is entirely a policy question, and
Sure.
I think Senator Perchlik, what Senator Perchlik had to say conforms with the testimony I heard, and I did not hear all testimony on this topic, but it was to allow extra time for training.
Yes, Senator Perchlik.
What I heard is that some of the testimony they heard from teachers saying in maybe schools were that they needed more time to prepare for this change. But then the emails we're getting is like, do not delay because this is better for the kids, these students that have these disabilities. So that's the 2 sides of it as far as I understand it.
So again, the question is, what's the difference? What are these kids not going to be getting if these rules are not put into place? Because we're hearing from parents.
And I think for me, it's similar to our discussion on some other deadlines we've had. They knew about it. They've had plenty of time. Like, is the deadline just because it's like a difficult thing that you don't want to do, or is it just COVID? Yeah. Is it, what are the reasons and why a year? Do you just pick a year because that sounds good, or what's the real thing behind this?
And in the meantime, do they just use the system that's been in place all of this time?
Yeah.
So what are the advantages to these new rules that the parents want to see implemented, and what are the disadvantages as far as the teachers and administration?
Right. And I think the people that want to implement it said it's not only that the rules were adopted in October, whenever it was, August, so they've had that time, but it's been in discussion and prior to that, because we told them to do these rules in Act 173, which was 2017, I think.
Yeah.
Or 2018.
Ms. St. James, is the screening for dyslexia in what they want to postpone? I know there's some screenings, and I know that I believe it's through this process that we were going to get. Do you know if that's there?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll take it up.
Several of the same people.
Yeah. Any other questions from Ms. St. James? This is very helpful. You know, largely, I think we'll be focused on section 2, I suspect, and this is very helpful in setting the table for our discussions later this week and next week. Any other comments from you, Ms. St. James?
I do. I just have one. Should the committee decide to advance section 2 in any way, in order to really make it effective, there would also need to be a notwithstanding clause regarding a rulemaking rule in Title 3 that I just overlooked in the drafting of this. So just a heads up that if you decide to go forward with this, I will be suggesting adding a little language in there.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Thank you, Ms. St. James. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I get why parents are concerned postponing these things, but were you were on this committee when you were doing this work?
Yeah, when we, not this work in particular, but Act 173 delays, we did, so somewhat similar, but not really, not about rules.
Yeah, Senator Shinnick.
To any interested parties watching, I'm just really glad to hear we're going to hear more about this, because I hear your emails, and I look forward to understanding this rule better.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Good to see you, Ms. Cargill and Mr. Giles.
Thank you for inviting us, Mr. Chairman.
H456, an act relating to establishing strategic goals and reporting requirements for the state colleges. We had a walkthrough yesterday of the bill with Ledge Counsel and the reporter of the bill, Representative Kathleen James. And there were a number of areas that it seemed to make sense for the one or both of you to weigh in on. So with that, I don't know if you want any more specificity, but I suspect you know what we're looking for.
Yeah, no, absolutely glad to have the opportunity to testify. For the record, my name is Scott Giles, and I'm the president and CEO of the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation. And I'm joined by Marilyn Cargill, our vice president for financial aid services, marketing and research. And I know the committee is very familiar with Marilyn and her work, but I would note in the context of this particular bill that Marilyn's a nationally recognized expert in student financial aid. And my testimony will be brief. We support H456 and had the opportunity to work closely both with Representative James and Representative Fagan, both in the initial drafting and during the revisions that were made by the House Education Committee as the bill was considered. I thought what I would do is touch briefly on, provide a little bit of background, touch on the two main pieces that we would speak to, and then take whatever questions you might have. I had the opportunity to serve with Representative James and Chancellor Zadatny on the select committee that the legislature established to take a look at funding for the Vermont state colleges. And I know this committee is very familiar with those recommendations. Within that report, there were two recommendations that this bill speaks directly to that I just want to touch on. One was a recommendation that VSAC work in partnership with the state colleges to look at establishing an affordability standard, the main goal of which was to provide the legislature with information that the legislature and this committee in particular could use for establishing policy. And then the second piece that I will touch on relatively briefly from a framing perspective is a movement that has been kind of slowly picking up steam across the country. And that is to include completion of the federal financial aid forms as some form of a graduation requirement. The logic behind this, and we'll talk a little bit more about it and respond to questions, is that many students make the decision that they can't afford to go on to any form of post-secondary education or training before they even know what federal or state financial aid they would be eligible for. And there's some estimates, kind of ranging, in the, kind of that several $1 million of federal financial aid is being left on the table by Vermont students, who think they may. And I'm going to pause. The National Guard chose this moment to take off with their F-35s, and so you may some noise in the background. So there has been a kind of a move within the college access community to look at whether or not creating some form of a requirement or an incentive for completing the federal forms as part of a graduation requirement would help increase college or post-secondary education and training attainment levels for students that at this point are unlikely to proceed. And there's a recommendation in this bill for that. I'll just start briefly with the kind of framing on affordability. Each year we have provided the legislature with information in our standard testimony that provides a window into what financial aid students are receiving at various types of institutions and what kind of debt levels are. As we engaged in in-depth conversations about affordability in the future of the Vermont State College system, it became clear that there was an appetite for providing more detailed and refined information to the legislature that could be used both for assessing adequate investments in financial aid, but for assessing adequate investments in the state college system. This bill authorizes VSAC and the state colleges to collaborate together to provide that detailed information. One of the things we appreciate about the legislation as it's drafted is it provides us the flexibility to provide, to develop both a standard and to provide a report to the legislature that can have a fair amount of nuance and can adapt over time as we learn things from our review of the data and as your needs kind of in particular change. So let me kind of stop there and see whether or not there are any questions that I might be able to answer that members of the committee might have about this component.
I think the only thing that you mentioned that we had a little bit of a conversation about was the requirement of high school students to complete the Fafsa. And we talked yesterday about having an opt-out language in here for those families. The other piece of that, I would say, is, and I've tried to do a little digging on this since we've heard, but couldn't find anything. I was under the impression that the state of Maine required students to apply for to either UMaine Orono or one of the state colleges as as a graduation requirement. And I don't know if I think that might have been policy at one point. I don't know if it's still policy. I'd be curious to know whether or not more students ended up in college and perhaps there might be a state out there that we could look to that the two of you know of that either does the requiring of the college application and or the FAFSA, just to put some numbers in front of us. I'll be honest, since I always feel as though, or I've been told that having the legislature put these kinds of graduation requirements in place doesn't always sit well, I'd say, with colleagues and others. So I know what you're trying to get at, and I support it, the concept, but we'll see what our colleagues think. So that's just a little bit of information. Senator Hooker, do you want to add anything before we ask you to respond?
I'm just wondering what percentage of high school students already fill out the FAFSA. I mean, you mentioned Mr. Giles that there's money left on the table. So how much money, what percentage of what's possible or what's available is left, and what percentage of kids are actually filling out the forms?
Marilyn, do you have the kind of most recent numbers for FAFSA completion rates in the state?
I do. So far this year, about 53% of our current senior class has filled out a FAFSA. And that number is fairly standard year over year, that we are somewhere between 53 and 57%.
Thank you. That's a lot. I mean, that's significant. There are a lot of kids left.
Right, a lot of kids left that still go out. Yeah, Senator Pursley.
Marilyn, do you know how that compares to other states?
Not off the top of my head. I think you would find, so I'm sure Scott's going to speak to this, but there are states right now that have been requiring the FAFSA as a graduation requirement. All of them have opt-out options. So let me just be quick to say that. But Tennessee and Louisiana have been doing this for a number of years. Louisiana, 3 years after implementing this, had seen FAFSA completion increase by 24%. And I'm looking really quickly to see, can I see what their starting number and their ending number was? And I'm not seeing it quickly enough that I want to try to quote something without doing my research. But both Tennessee and Louisiana are saying they're seeing increases in FAFSA filing rates. But that also, filing the FAFSA is a step towards going to college, but it does not mean that they went. So there's like a number of different steps along the way that you really need to pay attention to. Did more students file? Did more students apply for college? Did more students enroll? Did more students stay? And did more students graduate? And that whole spectrum is important in this conversation. And I'm going to stop talking because I'm sure Scott has things he'd like to say about that.
Sure. Okay, thank you, Marilyn. So I'll, I think, Chairman Campion, the questions that the committee had and the committee raised were questions that we also raised both in the context of the select committee deliberations and in the context of the crafting of this particular legislation. So the original language within the bill and the original recommendation coming from the select committee had been much more prescriptive and kind of said that, VSAC and AOE should work together to develop essentially to define how it is that Vermont would kind of create and implement a mandatory FAFSA filing requirement. As Marilyn kind of said, there are right now roughly 9 states that have implemented some form of the kind of FAFSA graduation requirement. There are roughly 6 others that are currently considering legislation, at least that we know of. But it's actually a much more complicated issue, as you know, than some people at least would think about at first blush. One is that even though the forms have become simpler, not every family can do this without support. Who's going to provide that support? There are students who, have very, very clear career and education paths that don't involve post-secondary education. How is it that you want to consider and kind of treat, their particular opportunities and balance those things. And as Marilyn indicated, what has happened as these requirements have been created is that they have, kind of various what we'll call opt-outs that were developed to take into account some of these kind of various scenarios. So as we considered this and as we engaged in conversations with AOE, we actually kind of shifted the language or advocated for shifting the language in here to include a guidance that would really require us to consider both whether we should have a requirement like this, and if we were to say that a requirement like this made sense, how we would implement it, but not to ask us to come back with a report that had already prejudged that conclusion. If that makes particular sense. So the language here is designed to say, VSAC and AOE, will you take a look at this? We would envision that we would engage with stakeholders to engage a conversation about, about this idea, and then come back to the legislature with our recommendation regarding does a graduation requirement make sense in the context of Vermont? If it does make sense, what would it look like? And if we've decided that it makes sense and we've got a vision of what it might look like, how would we go about implementing it so that the legislature could take the totality of that information up in considering whether it wanted to move forward?
Okay. So, I'm just looking through this again. We're talking in H 456, strategic goals largely to help our state colleges, right? I mean, that's really, and okay, so having students fill out the FAFSA form honestly strikes me as desperate, like if that's what we're gonna do, if that's where we're at, and I get it that if this were a bill to make sure to give students greater access and we wanted students to fill out the FAFSA form, I would say, yeah, totally, absolutely. And even this, I get it, but if that's where we're at, it seems like I'm wondering what might be missing from this that we're not really considering. Is there something that either of you feel as though, as it relates to either philanthropy, foundation work, building networks, all those kinds of things? One or both of you might say something about that.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I will kind of step back for a moment and say that in the context of the select committee analysis, this conversation wasn't focused on the state colleges per se. It was really focused on the education and workforce development needs of the state of Vermont. And this was a recommendation that, and remember that when that select committee was created, there was some ambiguity regarding whether this was all public higher education, all education, or targeted predominantly or entirely on the state college and university system. And most of the report is focused on the state colleges, but this is one of several recommendations that were intended to speak more broadly to, Vermont's education, training, and workforce development needs, and specifically to attack what were concerns about the college aspiration and attainment rates. Chairman Campion, as I think about this, there is one additional piece here that has occurred since that select committee recommendation took place that I think also is something to consider in this context. And that is the creation, with the support of this committee, of 802 Opportunity, which is the ability of any student coming from a family earning $50,000 or less to be able to attend the community college of Vermont tuition and fee free when you take into account the federal Pell Grant, the VSAC state grant, and then the supplemental scholarship. And for me, from a policy perspective, that's a game changer in part in this conversation, because part of what this could do properly designed is make sure that every high school kind of junior or senior, but particularly those who think for one reason or another that no education or training opportunities are available to them or affordable. We now in Vermont have a pathway that's available to virtually, kind of students from all of those families. And as you know, our budget request includes a request to take that income threshold up to $75,000, which we're hoping the legislature will support. But we think that actually has some potential to pretty profoundly impact the direction that an important cohort of juniors and seniors, the direction that they think that they're taking, because now really for the first time, we have the ability to say, if you do this, there is a path forward for you for virtually everybody.
Yeah, I for one fully support that, increasing it to 75. I mean, I'd love to see it increase to a family income of 100,000. That's That 75 is certainly a step in the right direction. We'll have the state colleges in, of course, because it'll also be good to just learn a little bit. I mean, we had them in, we had the chancellor in earlier this session to talk about this, the process that they're all going through with the transformation. But one of the questions I don't think I asked her, but I'm really curious about is, where is, and again, I'll just raise it now. It's not really for the two of you unless you know it, but where is the innovation? Where is the excitement in the classroom? What are the most innovative things that our state colleges can really be offering that's going to attract students to them because they are on the cutting edge of whatever it might be. History could be, how to teach foreign languages, teacher education. And those are questions though that we can save for them, and there might be a place for us to help them think about those types of conversations. So
I think those are very important conversations, and I know Chancellor Zadatny will have a lot to share with the committee about what they're thinking. Just offering just one brief observation from a select committee report.
Yeah.
As a member of that select committee, and as somebody who is with an organization that is working with students, kind of all of the time, one of the visions that is contained within the select committee recommendations of that unified Vermont State University kind of system is the possibility that a student could access the full range of academic offerings of the system without regard to geography. So without regard to whether they're located at Castleton. And I think the power to be able to offer a student, and this is without getting in front of the work that the chancellor and the team is doing there, the ability to offer a student attending Linden the ability to be able to access the educational programming that's available, at Castleton or at VTC, or for a student that is, pursuing interests at Castleton but wants to take advantage of the atmospheric sciences, that's available, predominantly at Linden, I think has the possibility to offer a very powerful value proposition that would make the state university system an incredibly powerful magnet for students, both within the state of Vermont and outside.
I think you're right, and access is important. Question is access to what, and that's where it comes down to what's happening in the classroom. Where's the innovation? Accessing things that they can get, that a student who could use the Maine, New Hampshire, New Jersey state colleges, we want them up here because we're offering some kind of innovative, exciting, coursework, et cetera. And that's also our role and responsibility here to our own students who want to stay in Vermont. We recognize, it's not business as usual out there. We're facing, we're in a climate crisis. We're in a crisis around this country's democracy. We're in a crisis around public education. And what are the things that we can look to our state colleges to help us with these things? In addition, not, and included, I'd say, in all of those things, not in addition, are career and technical education. We were talking to folks earlier about how do we get people to, do weatherization work, renewable energy work, all those things, road transportation work, all forestry, all that stuff is really essential, important to how we all live. It's also good, solid jobs. Senator Booker.
I'm just thinking and persevering on your comments about allowing access. And it sounds like a lot of online courses. I don't know. I mean, if you're at Castleton and you want to do some meteorological work in Linden, then what does that entail? And I guess I'd go back to Chairman Campion's question about where's the creativity and what are we doing differently so that it'll be appealing to these kids. I mean, they're all used to doing things online. Is that what it means, or is it more expensive?
Yeah, I have been pretty excited by some of the work that I have seen them doing to this point. And I would defer to Chancellor Zadatny
Sure.
with those details. But I think the committee is right to be focused. This is an important period, inflection point for us within the higher education community. And there is an incredible opportunity in front of us at the Vermont State College in university system. And I believe we need to all pull together in order to, allow them really to achieve all of the things that the select committee envisioned was possible.
Ms. Cargill, did you have your hand up or did you want to add something?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm just playing with my hands. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. Yeah. I see you brought Mr. Little with you. Is there anything in particular? We would love to talk to him about redistricting, but
That's another committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was a little late getting in. I was watching the floor action in the House through the end of the roll call vote.
no problem.
On the redistricting.
The redistricting.
House passed.
Oh, they did. Okay. Mr. Little, I think looks like we're comfortable with what we've heard around from Mr. Giles and Ms. Cargill, but wondering if there's anything you want to add.
No, I think VSAC has always tried to strike the right balance between being the sort of the focused advocate for students and the collaborator and the collaborator with the institutions where the students go. And that's, I think we are striking that balance now. You sometimes never quite know for sure how perfectly you're doing that. And we can always use some feedback about that.
Okay. Thank you. Good. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, interesting. Don't think we have too many more items, but before we just finish up our last two things. So I'm going to ask, unless I hear objection, we will add, this is related to page 456, the state colleges. And I think I did hear clearly that we'll try to add the opt-out. The other thing that I'd like to also add in there is, let's see if there is a way for them to apply to some of the state colleges, or fill out some kind of application. Just see if
Required?
opt-out, similar, if they're doing the Fafsa, if we're requiring them to do the Fafsa, which to me is all personal financial information. Fill out an application.
Maybe they could, they could create a universal state college application. So they don't have to pick a school or just like, hey,
If you're applying to one, you're applying to all of them. Yeah. Well, just think that, so so what they're saying here again in section 3 is they're looking for a report that on whether and how to implement a requirement that all high school students complete the FAFSA. Which again, I like it, I do get it. I hate to see several $1 million left on the table, and I think, all right, if that kid all of a sudden were to receive, he or she receives something and said, hey, I can go to CCB for free, that's great. Knowing that we would put in language saying, we also believe that there should be an opt-out. I don't know if we want to do the same. We didn't really get any follow-up on this from Ms. Cargill around whether or not there might be a state out there that's requiring college applications. And again, this is a report. This is asking what it would look like if we did. It's not implementing the policy. Senator Shandon.
I'm just pondering it. So I'm wondering what this FAFSA form actually looks like, and maybe might be that we just ask for them to acknowledge or permit the Vermont State colleges to directly market to them. But you're saying a full college application as requiring them to opt out or otherwise complete it in order to graduate.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to figure out a way, and I don't know what it looks like. If you're a kid, you're thinking, there's no way I can afford any of this. I don't even know if I get in. You fill out the FAFSA form, maybe, which they're recommending we do. Okay, so you get the information. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that if you find out that you can go to CCV for free or the State College of UVM at a reduced cost, then maybe that does get you excited. I don't know. And I think maybe just learning a little bit more about what other states do could be interesting.
I know that.
But I know what you mean, because I'm sitting here also thinking, okay, if we're requiring the FAFSA, then we require the application, are we going to then start to get to the point where, you know, you have to have financial literacy, and as the legislature all of a sudden have this huge other list of things that you need to graduate, and it's not really a requirement if it's an opt-out. So maybe there is something where it's a checking of the box, or yeah. I think the goal is we want kids to go to college if they want to be there, they should be there, and we want to make it affordable for them. Center lines.
I was just gonna say, it seems like an awful lot.
It does, yeah. For both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's something to think about.
Yeah, I'll ask Ms. Cargill, I'll have Daphne actually write to Ms. Cargill, and before we move forward, are there any states, or can she get us any more information, research on how this stuff is played out in other states that require the FAFSA and or ask the students apply for, college, university? Yeah.
Her point, but Ms. Cargill's point about having to know, kids filled out the FAFSA, how many of them followed through, how many of them actually went, how many of them stayed. I mean, that's a lot of data that needs to be figured out. But I know that, they have on-the-spot registration, at least Castleton did.
Yeah, it's not, the application, it's not like when it was, 4 essays and.
No,
I think it's,
if you had a certain.
So maybe it is already easy enough.
You could apply and you were accepted on the spot.
Yeah.
That's sorry.
No, but I don't, as far as the financial aid goes, then you have to carry through and apply, but, you were accepted. Do we, everybody that reaches a certain level, certain grade is automatically accepted into.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of filling out applications for $35 fees just to fill them out.
Right, and then what does that do?
That doesn't make me feel good. But if it is as easy as it already is, and we'll have the chancellor is coming in later this week, we can ask her a few of these questions. Senator Person, if you were going to ask.
Well, I just thought if it's that easy, then it's probably going to be a small number of students, but if they say, oh, well, I got in, and I could go to any of the state colleges, it might give them that one step closer to deciding, or like, oh, I don't want to go to college, but I didn't know about these BTC apprenticeship programs. For things like that. And I'm already accepted, and I already got this financial aid thing done because the school helped me with that in a real easy way that I didn't have to go home and write an essay or something. There's a value to that.
I want to be clear, I'm not against this. I'm just trying to think through, but what if they are committed to going to another college? Why have them fill out an application for the VSC?
Oh, that's a great, I would say maybe it's a college that they apply or something.
But what does it do to the workload for if every senior in the state is able to apply or to be accepted, then what does that mean for the
admissions office? What else are you gonna ask?
So what we do have at the University of Vermont, my best frame of reference is when a
Yeah.
undergraduate student wants to is planning to graduate, it is required that they will not get their diploma, nor will they be invited to any of the events unless they do fill out an intent to graduate form, which triggers a process where they have to do a bunch of check things, they have to talk to their advisor, they have to fill things out. I love the idea of an intent to graduate form in public schools, which makes them fill out a FAFSA form, and might also ask them if they would like to hear about more information about how to go to college with if you qualify or so on. So maybe looking at that process, what happens now.
Would you get us a copy of that?
What's that?
Can you get us a copy of that?
Sure.
Be interesting to see. 'Cause it's almost also makes me think of personalized learning plans. Is there a way to incorporate this into the personalized learning plan that you go through and do some of this kind of thing early on?
There's something here, something to explore, is trying to get more kids to know about the college pathways for them.
And the other pathways.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But I include VTC, I think VTC is part of this discussion.
Sure.
Those are
Yeah.
pathways to professional degrees.
Okay. Great. So just any other questions on that? So we'll continue that conversation.
Hamster is running.
What's that?
But the hamster is running.
So gubernatorial appointees, we'll do those first. We have three. I think we probably, we usually do a record of actions with gubernatorial.
I can't remember.
I'm having second thoughts about Colby.
Be quiet.
I think Senator Campion committed all of us to Colby yesterday, so it's too late.
Wait, that's right. I said, no need to have a hopeless night.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you could vote her down, just, you know.
Not at all, not
That
at
would
all.
be
And then have Senator
unusual
Chittenden
fun.
deliver that message.
What's the difference on the floor with the appointees where we just say, you know, the appointees listed in the calendar or
Yeah.
accepted?
Yeah,
and
it's
then
a
the ones-
voice vote, yeah.
But sometimes we do get up and say,
Commissioners and
Commissioner
secretaries.
secretaries, I don't know about these ones.
Haven't cared before.
If you want to.
Might as well.
we should at least do this. But yeah, I was trying to remember if we did floor things.
Reports for State Board of Education. Daphne, would you check with Secretary Bloomer, State Board of Education, if we need to do anything on the floor? Or if they're just, for new senators, they'll just be in the back of the calendar or the journal, and it would be one motion for all of them. But usually when a secretary in particular is nominated, and we did this last year, usually we try to have a roll call on secretaries in particular. So with that, why don't we at least finish the work, and then we can figure out if we need to do 4 confirmations or not. We heard from the student Gabrielle Lucci, came in last week and talked to us about her goals, a little bit of her background and her experience on the state board. Do I see a motion to advance Gabrielle Lucci's membership on the State Board of Education?
So moved.
So moved by Senator Hooker.
I think her dad is the director of Stafford, Bill Lucci.
Oh, really? Okay.
Where? Really? Oh.
We have a motion from Senator Hooker. Any discussion? If not, would the chair call the roll?
Senator Chittenden,
Yes.
Senator, this is not an alphabet, or Hooker,
Yes.
Senator Lyon,
Yes.
Senator Persick votes yes. Senator Terenzini,
Yes.
sleeping child, is gone. Senator Campion,
Yes. 6-0-0. If we need someone to report it, Senator Terenzini, would you be willing to do it from Rutland or Senator Hooker?
Either's fine.
Yeah,
If
okay.
Daphne-
We'll
I don't think you need.
we'll let you know if we need anybody to do it or not. Okay. Patrick Brown, also nominated by the governor. We heard from him last week. Had a good conversation. Do I see a motion to advance Patrick Brown to the State Board of Education? So moved by Senator Chittenden. Any discussion? Seeing none. Want to call the roll?
Senator Chittenden,
Yes.
Senator Hooker,
Yes.
Senator Lyon,
Yes.
Senator Persick votes yes. Senator Terenzini,
Yes.
Campion,
Yes.
Senator.
And then finally, worse. Professor Tammy Colby, also, we heard from Professor Colby yesterday. He's been in this committee working with us on a number of fronts. Also, reported by the governor to serve on the State Board of Education. Do I see anyone wants to nominate, endorse, advance? Senator Lyons advances Professor Colby's membership of the State Board of Education. Any discussion? Seeing none.
Senator Shindig.
Yeah, yes.
Senator Hooker,
Yes.
Senator Lyon,
Yes.
Senator Persick votes yes. Senator Terenzini,
Yes.
Senator Campion.
Yes. 600. So we will touch base with the Secretary's office, as well as, I believe it'll be Senator White, who oversees these kinds of things. She'll let us know if we have to do floor reports. Usually they're very brief, and if not, they'll be in the calendar, but that work is done. S-197 is a bill that came, I don't know what committee it came from. Some great work from Health and Welfare. We had an opportunity to review it and be a part of really what is really terrific stuff. And I very much appreciate the chair and the members of Health and Welfare for advancing it and keeping us abreast of it and partnering with us on this work. So I thought we would just do a straw poll, and if that's all we need, if we even on S-197. If anybody has any questions, Senate Education has reviewed it and supports that work. Anyone, Senator, any concern or comment at this point? Otherwise, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, great. 600. We terrific.
So
Any?
you know, if it's in appropriations
Yeah.
and it's ESSER funds, you get to defend it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds great. Maybe
I'll
we could
be
go
over
together.
here.
You'll be right there by my side. But seriously, thanks for all that. Anything else before the committee, before we adjourn for the day, March 16th, 2022? Seeing none. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.
Good afternoon. See ya.
Yeah,
Bye.
see ya.
Tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
This recycling in here.
Yeah, it's right over here.
Ah.
Oh, and right over there. Okay, we're off. Great.